Hello and welcome to you all. It is Friday, March 10th, 2023. Another week has come and gone, which means it is time for Fake News Friday. Nothing fake about our analysis, but we harangue those who are fostering the hurricanes of deception. We swim through the whirlpools of verbal wizardry that occur, and I'm just making up these adjectives now, and I'm right out of them. So let's just introduce my loyal and fantabulous co-host, fantastic, never a fabulous, Sue-Ann Levy. Sue-Ann, how was the weekend? I will add to that happy belated International Women's Day to you.
Oh my God. I'm actually decided I'm going trans because of International Women's Day. And maybe I can get more recognition as a woman if I become a trans. So can you imagine a trans woman who's actually a lesbian, but really is a woman? I mean, I'm totally confused, Andrew.
There was a story years ago in the Washington Post about a lesbian couple somewhere in the U.S. who one of them transitioned to male, and they were upset that all of their gay friends now just saw them as a regular old straight couple because one was a man and one was a woman. So you can actually over-diversify your way out of being diverse, apparently.
Oh my God, I rely on that oppression intersectionality of being a lesbian. So I'm not leaving that, that niche that I have created.
Well, I hope you felt significantly feted as a woman, at least for the time being, on International Women's Day. Let's get into the mainstream media and their perseverance, I will say, in crafting a narrative and trying to flog that narrative like a dead horse. One of them is that the conservatives are these evil, hateful, right-wing Nazi apologists for a few MPs meeting with the German member of the European Parliament, Christine Anderson, a few weeks back. And Pierre Poilievre has now been asked about this time and time again. He was in this one press conference and they just wouldn't lay off him about it. Take a look.
We impose any consequences on members of your caucus who met with Christine Anderson, whose views yourself said were vile?
Well, I think right now what I'm more concerned about is the vile and racist views of the Prime Minister, who after over half of, if I could, over half of his adult life, dressed up in vile, racist costumes so many times that he cannot remember them all.
It's such an odd and pointed question. How are you going to kick them out of caucus? It's almost as though they're lobbying for that to happen.
Yeah, well, you know that the legacy media has ceased to be reporters. They're repeaters, and they've become lobbyists on behalf of the Trudeau government. Much of them, of course, many of them being on the payroll of the Trudeau government, in particular CBC. So, I mean, why should we be surprised?
Yeah, and I think that, the line that I've used on the show in the past and on my own show is that when the media goes after the Liberals, it's for not living up to what a Liberal is supposed to be in their view. When they go after Conservatives, it's for being Conservatives. It's for believing the things that they believe. And in this particular case, even if Pierre Poilievre were to say, yep, absolutely, we're going to kick out Leslyn Lewis and Dean Allison and Colin Carey, it wouldn't make the problem go away. You would just give them an ounce of flesh and they'd keep on looking for more.
Yes, they're never going to be content. And, the hypocrisy, it just reeks of hypocrisy because, we've seen so many times when Trudeau or one of his cabinet members, highly placed cabinet members have met with suspect people. And, just recently, there was a whole group of people, Omar Al-Kabra and some of the MPs meeting with Palestinian anti-Semites on Parliament Hill with Palestinian terrorists. And, there was very little coverage of that. It kind of went and happened and then it blew away, which it often does with the legacy media. But I'm getting very frustrated with the absolute double standard of how they cover Pierre Poilievre versus, I guess their handout master.
What did you think of how Poilievre tried to turn it around on them and basically say, you want to talk about racism, let's talk about Prime Minister Blackface? Do you think that was an immature low blow, or is that how you have to play the game now?
I that's the way I play it. Because I always say that, there is a double standard. And I think, and they like to use that word, whataboutism. You're just engaging in whataboutism because they can't handle the truth. But the point is that there is a terrible double standard. So maybe it comes across as immature to some, but the whole thing is that Trudeau is not judged on anything to the degree that Poilievre is, and relatively minor things. Whereas, I've lost count of the many, many issues that Trudeau's gotten a free pass on.
Yeah, and when you talk about minor issues, that actually feeds into this next story here, which I will say is probably one of the most Poilievre derangement syndrome affirming stories we could come up with. So there's apparently this Canadian band called the Tragically Hip, which everyone in Canada likes and no one outside of Canada has ever heard of. And, I know what it is. I could probably name 3 of their songs and not sure if I could pluck any of them out of a lineup except for the late Gord Downie. But Pierre Poilievre, keeping with Canadian content, which we're supposed to be celebrating and having more and more of, at one of his events in the background, it wasn't like his stage entrance song or anything. He wasn't doing it like Eye of the Tiger and Newt Gingrich walking into CPAC. They had in the background a song called 50 Mission Cap by the Tragically Hip. And it was Karima Saad, the independent journalist and lawyer, that had tweeted a clip and mentioned this. And then the guitarist for the Tragically Hip, Paul Langlois, tweeted out that it was highly offensive, if true, highly offensive, that Pierre Poilievre was using their song. Then they, of course, found out that because the event was being held at a venue that is registered with SOCAN, which is the licensing agency for music, and if you book an event there, you pay a SOCAN licensing fee that lets you pay all of these songs, it was entirely fine. It was entirely legitimate. They could play the song, and then the Langlois actually sort of backed up, and he said, well, we would like it if people sought our approval, but we weren't sure about the specifics. No, they stepped in it.
They absolutely did. And, I think Tragically Hip, what have you heard about them lately? I mean, we heard a lot about them when poor guy Gord Downie was dying of brain cancer. But what have we heard from them lately? And I would be, if I were a member of the Tragically Hip, and I'm no longer Tragically Hip because I'm a boomer.
I'm just tragic. I've never been hip.
Tragically Hip. But I would be happy that I got some publicity. My goodness. I always thought in this business, there is no negative publicity. Just celebrate the fact that your name is being mentioned. And, to lose your lunch over it, to get crazed about it. I mean, this is the world we're living in right now. And it's not a good world.
Yeah, and it's kind of an odd one here when he's saying that they want permission for people to play their music. No, when you register with SOCAN and allow your song to be played at SOCAN facilities, you have decided that you'll just take the money of whomever is going to play your song, and you don't really get any oversight on that. And there was this little kind of snippy exchange between someone else who said to Paul Langlois, oh, am I allowed to play it while I'm working alone baking? And Paul just says, no, you're not allowed. And someone said, I'm having a party next weekend. Can I play your music for my guests? And he says, yes, thanks for asking, but you don't have to. So now all of a sudden, no one knows if in Paul Langlois' eyes, you're allowed to play the Tragically Hip. So I think we all have to, just in the interest of being cautious, of being abundantly cautious, not play the Tragically Hip. We don't want to offend the sensibilities of the guitarist.
I'm not playing any Tragically Hip songs, anywhere in my house, okay? Because he may find out that I'm a conservative and he doesn't like conservatives playing his songs. But, this speaks to the absolute derangement of people who don't like Pierre Poilievre. He didn't even check into what the situation was. He just reacted emotionally to a tweet without even doing his homework or research, and then, stepped in it and then had to back off. And, all you can do is laugh.
Indeed. And one thing that is no laughing matter at CBC is their diversity unto death approach, where you have to have all of the boxes checked if you are this religion, this ethnicity, this sexual orientation, this level of ability or disability. They want to know so that they can have all of these diversity quotients. Well, CBC staff were, according to an article in the National Post, rather shocked to find that all of these confidential diversity things they were filling out in one survey ended up stored in their online HR files. So employees were putting in their sexual orientation, their gender identity, and all of a sudden they appeared in their online human resources profiles when they thought they were just filling out confidential diversity surveys. And, I don't think you should be that surprised, because if your company is reducing everything down to these top level identities, of course they care enough about these to put them in your HR files.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you can't sort of suck and blow at the same time. You want the job, you get the job because you're a member of an oppressed group. I'm using the activist language. You're diverse. You have intersecting. How many words can I throw out this afternoon? Intersecting identities. But then it shows up as part of your human resources file. Well, hey, that's how you probably got the job, or got to keep the job, or helped you get the job. I mean, that's the way the world is these days in various institutions, not this is CBC, but I see it as school boards as well. If you're a member of an oppressed group, you get a jump on other people. It's a sad reality. But what did they expect?
Yeah, one employee said they felt it was a betrayal of trust because they thought this was just going to be purely statistical data. CBC spokesperson has said, yeah, but it is strictly confidential and only a few people have access to it. And the survey was voluntary. If an employee wanted to do the cultural census, they can see their own answers, but their supervisor doesn't have access to the information. So, look, I think the whole point is that when we start breaking down identity into these different categories, the overlapping identities, the intersecting identities, racial, sexual, why does it matter if you are of a particular sexual orientation at work? I mean, unless you're trying to run the CBC internal dating app, I don't think it really matters if someone is straight or gay.
Oh, come on. Most people probably know these days. What's the big deal? I mean, it wasn't like back in my day in the 90s when I had to live in the closet because I thought it was a, career limiting to be a lesbian in the workforce and a conservative paper. It's a totally different world now. I think they're just finding things to complain about. Maybe they're not busy enough. Maybe there are too many people going out on a story all at once.
Yeah, that's my question, is how much time was spent and how much money was spent on the CBC cultural consensus or cultural census or whatever they're calling it. There are some areas, though, that are insufficiently diverse to some people. One of those is the construction business. An op-ed in the Toronto Star written by a woman named Kristen Coots says, we need more women in construction. Now, I don't know how many women there are in construction, but I do know that any construction project I've ever had around my own home has had all-male crews, and most construction sites you drive by or walk by have all-male. Not always, but there is fairly consistently a dearth of women in the construction business. And what Kristen Coots says is that it's getting tiring and predictable to see middle-aged white men wearing a t-shirt, jeans, construction boots, and sunglasses strutting out of people's homes after putting in a half day with no confirmation on when they're coming back. It's infuriating. She says construction is a playground for men. And she makes the point that male contractors are ripping women off. She talks about getting screwed by a plumber. I think there are some unscrupulous contractors that will just as easily rip off men and women that are equal opportunity scam artists, but I think most are fairly honest there. She says women make up only 5% of those in the skilled trades, and that is a generous stat at best because it includes hairstyling and aesthetics professionals. We need more women. We need more women of color. Sue-Ann, do you care as a woman that you are underrepresented in construction?
Not a bit. And, by very sheer fact that, it's like the firefighting business or being a firefighter. There are very few women who are firefighters. Why? Because, the reality is that men have are able to lift and run into tall buildings, lifting hoses, wearing 40, 50, 60 pounds of equipment. And women just physically are not able to do that. The same thing with construction. There are certain tasks in construction that women are just not capable of doing physically. Having said that, there I've seen women. I live in Toronto, very close to the LRT, unfortunately too close to the LRT boondoggle, the Eglinton crosstown, and I've seen women on the job site. But again, there are physical limitations to women. And I dare say she didn't think this through. And I also would say that she didn't really get any statistics. This was all anecdotal. I don't recall her saying, well, I looked at Stats Canada, there are X number of women in construction. But I think that for the certain jobs like being a plumber or even electrician, I mean, those are jobs that women can do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would also feel very weird in a situation, and maybe this is my own issue, but I don't think it is. I'd feel very weird in a situation where I have to like bark some, not that I, try to be rude or anything, that I'm barking orders at some woman in my home, like pick that up, move that over there. No, I think you need to do this, or, I just think there are certain things that are more suited to women and men. And there are some people in those categories that want to defy those categories. And I think they should be encouraged. There's not a single thing she does here to explain why women are not gravitating to construction. She's identifying what she thinks is a problem, but if women want to, and they're encountering a barrier, what's that barrier? I think the issue is a lot of women do not want that.
Yes, exactly. And I think because of the physical limitations, and I think that women, it's a dirty business, and, a lot of women just choose not to do it. I don't think for a minute that they're being excluded from construction business. In fact, I know in major cities across Canada, there's a dearth of construction workers. And if women wanted to do it, they need them. But again, I mean, can you see women lifting heavy piping, or, I don't know, going out and, the scaffolding up high, 60, 70 feet high? They just probably choose not to do it.
Yeah, if they want to, power to them. If there's an issue that's preventing them, we can talk about that. But you can't just kind of throw out the idea of there aren't enough women in construction and then not identify any reasons for that, which makes me kind of think it comes down to personal preference. But Sue-Ann, I absolutely encourage you and your lovely wife, if you want to put on your hard hats and start schlepping drywall, you have my full approval in the name of diversity.
Well, I'll leave that, but I can hammer and I can screw in a nail. So I'm actually, and my wife is very, very good. She is so handy. It's unbelievable. So, we should tell the lady who wrote this article that there are women who actually do things around the house and are very handy.
There we go. Well, that does it for us. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. We'll be back with more Fake News Friday, probably on Fridays, although you never know these days. Sue-Ann Levy, I'm Andrew Lawton. Thank you so much, everyone.